Stay free with me, Russell Brand. We're joined now by journalist Bari Weiss, founder and editor of the Free Press, former editor of the New York Times, who's obviously come to public notoriety lately because of her work on the Twitter files. Thanks for coming on, Bari.
Thanks for having me, Russell.
Were you astonished by the mainstream media's reaction to these revelations, or was it largely what you expected? And do you feel vindicated, having resigned, broadly speaking, from your position at the New York Times because of the new establishment liberal orthodoxy that was prevailing there? How has this experience affected you in your opinion on mainstream media journalism broadly, mate?
It just confirmed what I experienced myself, and it was vindication of exactly why I decided to walk away from the prestige and start my own thing that is trying to close the gap between reality, the reality that people can see with their own eyes and ears, and the insistence on sort of putting the narrative, whatever it is that given day, over reality. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do with the Free Press. You asked if I was surprised at the kind of mainstream media blackout, or then the insistence once they had to cover it that it was a nothing burger. I wasn't surprised at all. But you'd be hard pressed to come up with sort of a cleaner example of one of the problems happening, not just in America, but around the world more broadly, which is this incredible gap between the things that the legacy press has decided are news and the things that actual living people in the world think are news and are important to them. And I would venture to guess that most Americans, whether or not they have a Twitter account or have ever logged on to this, see that two stories here matter a great deal to them. One, the fact of the incredibly cozy relationship between parts of the United States government, namely the FBI and Twitter. And second, the unbelievable power that basically a handful of private companies have over the public discourse. Those are the things that Matt Taibbi, me, Abigail Shrier, Michael Schellenberger, and a team of incredible independent journalists have revealed. And I think the fact that Elon Musk decided to come to a bunch of people essentially with newsletters rather than the Washington Post and the New York Times tells you a lot about, where real trust in the media these days actually lies. And it's just no longer with those legacy institutions.
I think it's astonishing in and of itself, and I would imagine in a sane world they will not be able to recover from the depth of these revelations, how thoroughly those social media organizations have been infiltrated by state interests, and as you say, how much power is wielded by those very social media organizations. It's unprecedented. The previous incarnation of monopolizing power was in energy resources, of course, and the fact that attention, consciousness itself can be controlled in the way that it has been. Our community here on our channel are astonished. It's nothing. It's sort of like Foucaultian biopolitics. It's controlling reality itself, huh?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is so strange to me about this is that somehow caring about outsized corporate power, caring about the amount of power that a number of extraordinarily wealthy individuals or political cliques within companies have over the entire world, the idea that that's now coded as a right-wing or conservative issue is absolutely bizarre to me. I do not understand how we've gotten to a place where that is not in the interests of everybody, and specifically not in the interests of the left, that historically has cared deeply about outsized corporate power, has cared deeply about the voices of everyday individuals being censored by big tech in this case and the government, all of which I know is exactly what you talk about on this show, which is why I'm really excited to be here.
The emblematic issue that has initially defined this arc, even prior to the revelations that you and your colleagues, if that's the correct term, have made, was the Hunter Biden story, which when I first learned of it and started hearing about it, it was with the tinge of publications like the New York Post, and because of the hue of sexual and drug-related orientations, I felt that perhaps it was a sleaze story rather than a power story, and as was commonly understood, something that, needn't or oughtn't be reported. But the fact that this has become, in a sense, a litmus test of the level of censorship is extraordinary, and also a way of marking and measuring the way that what we call the left, establishment neoliberalism, the new conservatism of our age, because it certainly doesn't have any interest in sharing power, generating new power bases, telling the truth, holding corporate power to account. It shows you now that this has become, in a sense, the center of true establishment power, in the way that, that their interests align with big tech, the way that their interests align with the military-industrial complex. So we're, in a sense, facing at least a new understanding. We finally understood that power isn't what it was when it was Dick Cheney and Wolfowitz and Bush. That's not it anymore. The Democrat Party is the representative. I'm not saying that the Republicans are a great party. Far from it. That's not where I'm heading at all. What I'm saying is doesn't this suggest that a completely hollowed out, nullified, corporatized Democrat Party that's no longer fit for purpose?
I can't fit that many words into a sentence the way you just did. But what I can say is I think one of the things that our reporting has revealed, and one of the reasons that I became so uncomfortable at the New York Times as a journalist whose vocation is to pursue my curiosity and to look into dark corners, even when what those dark corners reveal is inconvenient to the powers that be, is the way that there has become a kind of hive mind, let's call it, between parts of the government, big tech, legacy press, and they're all sort of speaking in unison. And whenever a huge group of powerful institutions are speaking in unison and censoring anyone that deviates even in the smallest way, we should be skeptical. The fact that the New York Post was locked out of Twitter for reporting on the news, regardless of how tawdry and frankly tragic a lot of the things on that laptop were, anyone who had any principle should have opposed it. The fact that so many people under this fig leaf of hacked documents, as if that's not what the New York Times and the Washington Post do every single day. What are the Pentagon Papers? I mean, come on. The idea that that was the fig leaf that they hid behind told you just about everything you needed to know about what was actually happening there. And I think the reporting that Taibbi has done, the reporting that my colleague, and that's definitely the right word, Michael Schellenberger has done, have revealed the fact that essentially what the FBI did in the case of the Hunter Biden story was pre-bunked an inconvenient piece of information. In other words, they preyed on, I think, the well-intentioned inclinations of people at these tech companies and essentially told them there's something coming down the pike. It is Russian disinformation. And you should just be aware that, you know, the Russians are trying to steal the election or sway the election. So that when the story of the Hunter Biden laptop came out, they were already primed to understand it in a particular way. But for me, the reason that story was an important moment is I just couldn't understand, even if you think the New York Post is a right-wing rag, I think it's the paper of record in New York. But even if you think that, and even if you think what's in the Hunter Biden laptop was tragic and embarrassing and shouldn't have been relevant to who you voted for in the election, go with all of that. Shouldn't it chill you, the idea that one of the most powerful amplification systems in the world, in all of humanity, in all of human history, was locking out a newspaper from sharing information? It really shouldn't matter what party you vote for. It shouldn't matter what you think of Hunter Biden or Joe Biden or Donald Trump to oppose that on the most basic principles that are enshrined in our Bill of Rights, in our Constitution. I mean, these are like, it doesn't get more fundamental than that. And it really was shocking to me to watch the way that people fell around this particular story. And I think the reporting that we've done over the past few weeks have vindicated, frankly, the reporting of the New York Post.
What it seems to me like, Bari, is that these principles are a veil that masks a real appetite for tyranny, a kind of tyrannical impulse that will be exercised when necessary. Perhaps what concerns me most is the set of assumptions that ordinary people are unable to discern information for the validity of information for themselves, are unable to calculate what information to pay attention to. For me, this suggests that the principles that are pushed to the forefront are not relevant, not rooted, grounded, or relevant. I also feel that what we're beginning to see is nominated public villains that, again, that I wouldn't typically particularly support or laud. For example, support Trump, you somewhat uniquely banned from that platform. And then curiously, currently, Musk himself. I wonder if you can talk to us about what appears to be veiled by sort of liberal aesthetics, a kind of new form of technological tyranny, and what you think about the movements within media and the kind of figures that are presented as new avatars for vilification.
Okay, let's unpack that. I think, first of all, having been the villain of the day more than once on a platform like Twitter, I definitely think that when you're trying to redraw the bounds of what is in and what is out, what is morally acceptable and what is not, you have to make public examples. You have to scapegoat particular people in order to signal to everyone else watching, look what we just did to that person. You could be next. Step out of line and we'll do the same to you.
Watch entire episodes on demand for free at rumble.com/Russell Brand.